Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hi, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Periodically on this podcast, we've talked about words we've used in early education and in raising young children, and we've wondered, is that the right phrase to be using, or should we change the way we're talking about something? We're going to bring another one to you today, and that is the phrase, I guess it's a phrase, the phrase brain break. Is that the appropriate thing to call it when children have been doing some sort of learning activity and then we have them move around? My experience is that in recent years, this is very often called a brain break. And it's sort of like we've been sitting at this table doing the really hard work of learning and growing, and now we're going to take a brain break, and the learning and growing is going to stop while you move around. And that's entirely inaccurate.
Yes.
It's actually, we're going to have you move around now because physical movement is a really important part of brain activity. What physical movement does, folks, is it activates the brain. This is not a break. This is reactivation of the brain. We're getting things moving and going again. And let's not forget that physical development is one of the domains of learning, one of the areas of learning and development that children need to work on. So they may have been at the table with you working on language or literacy or math or cooperative games or whatever you were doing at that table. But then when you say, let's take a break and move around, you're just shifting it to skew a little more toward physical development.
It's still learning, right? You're still learning. Yeah. And to me, anytime somebody says brain break, it's usually like a teacher throwing on a video of some sort on a smart board, right? Okay, that's what my experience.
But even then, look, people who are not on YouTube can't see me. I'm like when you smell something bad.
Yeah.
You can't. So video, we should be limiting their screen time, but even then, when you're watching video, there are parts of your brain that are very active.
Right. And I think that when you put on the movement videos, there is some sort of activity in your brain to be like, I need to move this way. I want to move like the person on the video is moving. How do I get my body to move in that way?
Right.
And that's a lot of thinking and a lot of brain activity to handle that. And your brain is say you did just come from the table doing literacy or math or a cooperative game, right? Your body needs movement of some sort to process all of that information that you just got from the table. So it's not giving your brain a little nap time like it implies when you say brain break. Brain break makes it seem like, okay, your brain is going to stop for a little while and that it needs a little rest time. No, it's not resting. Your brain never is resting when you're at school. So why are we calling it this?
Children are learning and growing at every waking moment. And I'm not sure how, again, like so many other things, how this became a phrase that we use. I have tended to use the phrase movement break. We're going to take a movement break, but I'm going to now question the word break because it seems to indicate that what's happened at the table, that sort of learning was way more important than any kind of learning and development that can take place when you leave the table. And as we sit here right now on this podcast recording, I realize that maybe I need to take the word break out of it as well. It is not a break. It is a change in activity. So even just to say to the children, we're going to do some movement now, may be more appropriate than saying we're going to take a movement break.
Yeah, that's typically what I do. I usually, and only because I think for many, many years, I worked in preschools and childcare centers, and I never thought of it as a brain break until I went to elementary school. And all the
That's
older
interesting.
grades were calling it brain break. And I was like, I don't
Mhm.
get it, but it was never part of my vocabulary, so I never used it like that. And so I would always say, okay, we're going to do a little yoga now, or we're going to go dance now, or we're going to do a little movement now. I never called it brain break. I never called it movement break even. I just don't think of it as a break. I just think of it like, this is what we're going to do now. This is part of our day. This is part of our schedule. This is part of our curriculum. Or sometimes maybe it's not. Maybe it's on the fly because you're like, hey, these kids need to move around a little bit more today. Hey, let's change it up and do a dance for a little bit. I don't call it a break at all. But I think this term brain break, or even just break in general, is like a new thing, maybe. Or maybe the older grades were always using it, and I just didn't know until I started working in a school that had older grades. I don't know.
I've been in early childhood programs where I've heard them say brain break. Or if I walk in and the children are very active, sometimes teachers will turn to me and say, "Oh, we're in the middle of a brain break right now." And but actually the children are doing a whole lot of interacting and imitating, and they're attending to what they're doing, and they're building physical development. And what's so breaky about that? There's nothing breaky about that. You know what a break is, folks? A break is when I decide to walk away from this desk I work at and take a nap. That's a break.
But Cindy, even while you're napping, your brain is working. Okay,
right? Yeah, because I wake up and I text you. I wake up and I text you. I go, I had an idea.
Yes, it is so true. Because your brain is processing so much in your sleep, right?
It's true. It's true. All right, so it's not.
Your brain is never on a break. Your body, when you're napping, is breaking.
Yes, my body is taking. And by the way, if people are listening to this, they must think, "Wow, it's nice to be Cindy. She gets up and goes takes a nap." No, that hardly ever happens. Just so you all know, hardly ever happens that I get to take a nap. It's like a glorious day when I get to take a nap.
It is.
So you're right, though. I was also thinking, break. Let's say like, oh, I go out and we live not too far from the ocean, and I go to the shore. We call it the shore here in Jersey. We go to the shore, and I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to stand on the boardwalk and watch the ocean. But my brain is still working.
Your brain is still working. You are smelling things, seeing things, tasting things. It is working.
I'm going to go. It's probably more appropriate to say I'm going to go and be in nature for a few minutes, or I'm going to go and look at the ocean. Again, I rarely do that in the middle of any kind of work week. Never.
It's so good for you to do
something
that.
like that. It is
a little time in nature during your work day.
I think maybe I should ride to the shore after we're done recording this and just look at the ocean. Yes. So the entire, now I'm not only like, we've called it a brain break, and that was inappropriate. I think the word break, it gives a bad impression. This is what I think in the end. I think it gives a bit of an impression that certain types of development and learning are more valued than other types of development and learning. But actually, we have to be teaching the whole child, every part of their development and learning, every domain and area of learning, every content area, the whole thing needs our support and needs practice. And so I'm not sure why we're always prioritizing one over the other, except that society tells us
society has said that you need to prioritize literacy and math, and then the physical goes to the wayside, science goes to the wayside. But like, especially physical, I feel like in the early childhood years, I feel like that physical component is the one that's like, we don't need to do that. We need to concentrate on learning how to read, or whatever it may be. And then they're like, because they move on their own. We don't need to teach them that. But you really, really do. There's so much development that takes place physically that needs to be addressed too. And I don't know why that component always gets thrown aside. I guess because
I don't know, but
is it? Should we?
There's a reason. There's a reason why licensing agencies will say you can't take away a child's outdoor time as a punishment, because they need that physical activity. It's mostly gross motor, right? And if you have ever worked in a place, which I have, that didn't have a large room that you could go to like a gym in inclement weather, how it changes the children's behavior when they don't get physical movement and when they don't get to go out in nature. We all know that. And
Right.
again, that playground time, that is not a break from learning. A great deal happens during that playground time. A lot of social emotional development, language and communication development, gross motor, fine motor. What am I missing here? I'm missing. I know
Did you say
cognitive.
social? Yeah.
I did, I think.
Yeah.
Cognitive, that whole decision making, evaluating, deciding about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
It's all still happening. And we sometimes treat that playground time like it's a break from learning. And I know
Yes.
adults do sometimes because they go out and they talk to each other instead of the children, which is not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be interacting with the children just like you do inside. Because just like it's not a brain break for the children to go out to the playground, it's not a teacher break for as if you were not on duty.
Yes.
Right. You are not at lunch. You are
Yeah.
not on your
You are
break. You're supposed to be
to be with
interacting with the children.
Yes. Yes.
So are we saying there is no break and we should take that word out and we should just say things like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe the break part of it needs to be taken out too. Right?
And not, some people might be listening to this and saying the children don't really know the difference. And I agree with that. The children don't know the difference. The problem is the impression that it gives adults, right? The impression that it gives families about what's important. It's all important. The impression that it gives to the larger community about early education and about how we teach young children. We do support their movement and their physical activity, and the impression it gives about how the brain works. Actually, physical movement activates the brain. And a lot of people don't understand that. It is not downtime for the brain. Haven't you ever gone for a walk? I've done this. I've gone for a walk, and I come away with ideas I couldn't come up with before because it sort of jump-started my brain.
Yes. Yes. I take walks often. I have a very active dog, and people go to me and how come you don't bring your headphones with you and listen to music or an audiobook? I'm like, I don't need to, right? Because that's when I get my thinking done. That's when I process what I've done during the day. That's when I try to figure out my problems. That's when sometimes I'm not even thinking about a problem and boom, a solution pops in my head because it's.
Yeah, I've done that. All of a sudden I have a solution to something.
Yes. Whereas I could be sitting at my desk thinking about a solution for hours and be like, you know what? I got to walk away for a minute. And that's when it pops in. Or sometimes how when your brain is not working, when you're in the shower or something, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got it. I know.
You know why? You know why? Because your brain is working. Your brain is working. It's not a break.
It is working. It's always working. It never stops working. It is always on. There is no turn off button for your brain.
No. And at the very least, I think we need to reconsider the phrase brain break. At the very least, movement is better than brain. And like I said, while we're recording this, I realized break is wrong too.
Yeah. Why can't we just say we're going to do a little movement now?
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to take a walk. We're going to go outside.
It's time to go outside. It's time to do yoga.
We weren't conditioned that way. We were conditioned differently as when we were young. So I think that it's very natural as we're cleaning up something that's happening to look at the children and say, all right, we're going to take a break now and go outside. I think that's really a natural way to look at it. Yeah. It's because of how partially anyway, I think, how recess was looked at when we were in elementary school, middle school, high school. Recess was looked at as a break from learning. We're going to give the children recess. They're going to get to run around, move their bodies, exercise, get some exercise, which is important, and take a break from the learning. But it's not, because when I was on recess, I was learning a lot about social emotional development and interacting with peers. I was learning a lot of physical development. We were playing sports or games that required a lot of cognitive development. So let's be realistic about what recess is.
I think recess is more, instead of saying it's a break, because there is a lot of learning going on, it's more, I guess, unstructured, right? Maybe would be the right term, where it's there's not a teacher directing you on what you can do or what you are going to do. It's just, okay, go out, do your thing, play with other people that are maybe in different classes, You want to pick up a game of basketball, go ahead. You want to go on the slide, go ahead. You want to sit there and pick at the grass, go ahead. It's whatever you feel like concentrating on for that half hour, you go and do it, right? And I think your brain is still working, and yeah, maybe it's a break from the structured part of the day, but it's still there's still learning going on. So it's not like your brain is stopped. It's just this is the unstructured portion of your learning, maybe. But that's not
maybe if it's unstructured. If it's unstructured,
if it is, like some of those recesses are. But I don't see teachers gonna start calling it that either. I don't know what the right term would be. Maybe when some of our peeps have a term.
I think we just say we're gonna go get some movement. We're gonna go get some movement. Let's go and move our bodies around and do some other things. Can it just be let's do something else where we get to move around? Something like that. My experience when I provide professional development is that I'll bring these things up. I bring up some of the things that we've talked about on the podcast in other episodes that didn't seem to make sense to me. Like when a child behaves in a way that's inappropriate, looking at them and saying, no, thank you was one of those phrases that we pointed out makes no sense when you think about it.
No sense.
And sometimes I talk about these things during professional development sessions, and on the Zoom even, I can see light bulbs going on over people's heads, and they have these looks on their faces like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Sometimes people will laugh when I say these things. I've had people put in the chat in Zoom, like, this is so funny. I never thought about what I was saying. Yes. And so I'm hoping that from this episode, our preschool peeps walk away thinking, what are we saying? This is not a brain break. This is the brain being reactivated.
Yeah.
So, I think when I see that phrase, whether it's students of mine or people I work with, I'm going to point out it's not really a break. The brain is very active.
Not really a break. Yeah.
Right? Not really a break in the way that we use the word break.
Yeah.
All right, preschool peeps. I hope you're sitting there like I've seen so many people do and just kind of rolling their eyes and laughing at the things we do without even thinking about it. And the things we say without thinking about it. We don't think about it.
Right? No, we don't think about it. And if you're out there and you have like a better term for it, please let us know. Because maybe there is a term out there that I'm not even aware of that's being used that would be more appropriate. I would love to hear it.
All you have to do is go to howpreschoolteachersdoit.com and send us a contact form, or find the How Preschool Teachers Do It Facebook page. I couldn't come up with the name Facebook for a second there. Did you see the Facebook page? And go ahead and send a comment or whatever it is we all do on Facebook to reach each other. So go ahead and do that. And we look forward to seeing what you say about this. And if you're listening to us and you thought, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And you were laughing, let us know that too.
Yeah, let us know.
Okay, preschool peeps, we will catch you next time on the podcast.
Bye, peeps.